Our next guest is Maryland baseball pitching coach Jimmy Jackson. Coach Jackson, thank you for coming on.
I appreciate you having me.
Starting with the most recent news, coming off that weekend series loss to Michigan, but you guys have won 20 of the first 28 games. Kind of, how do you evaluate how the season's gone so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all disappointed with how the weekend went, of course. But like we were talking about in the airport a little bit, I mean, if before the season started, you told us we were going to be 28-8 and 500 after the first couple weekends, it's like, hey, we're going to be doing pretty well if that's the case. I think we knew we were going to be good going into the season, but with so many new players and half the coaching staff being new as well as myself, it's you just kind of never really know. You don't really have much to judge off of when you lose the top half of your lineup, your entire weekend rotation. Guys are filling roles left and right. I feel like it was kind of inevitable. We were going to have a bad weekend sooner or later. And if that's our worst weekend and we still take one on the road, that's still pretty solid.
Do you feel like that streak was maybe a little bit of a distraction or in the back of players' minds, or was the series loss just good adversity to have as conference play is starting?
Yeah, I think that's all it was. I mean, I know our guys were aware of it, but to be honest, I mean, there's a very small handful of players that actually participated in all those weekends, let alone in the roles that they're being asked to play in now. So I know it was in the back of guys' minds because it was pretty cool. It's like having a hitting streak or a win streak or whatever. I don't think it necessarily put any type of added pressure on our guys. I mean, that's one thing I think we do so well here with Coach Swope is, we ourselves as coaches don't put much pressure on our guys as it is. I think they get to play pretty relaxed, and it seems to work pretty well. I just think it was a bad weekend, to be honest.
So at this point in the season, obviously, pitching coach, how do you evaluate the pitching performances? Currently, while recording, second best ERA in the Big Ten. If you take it back to last year, I think it was fourth worst. So how have you kind of evaluated that turnaround?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very happy with it. I mean, I think the difficult part for me is I'm a really big believer in our main three goals, and I know when we do those things, we give our team a chance to win. And for instance, this weekend, we didn't come close to achieving those three goals. Therefore, we produced not as well on the mound. But it's difficult, I mean, between the travel in this conference, the travel that we've had in general, being on the road so much, and we're going to continue to do so here on out. I have been happy with it, though. I mean, we've had, you have a guy coming from a mid-major pitching at this level on the weekends for us. You got a former reliever pitching at this level, and then a freshman. So basically, three guys pitching on the weekends that have not done it at this level. Our go-to guys out of the pen, again, only one of which has done it at this level. So I've been very pleased with them. It's hard. Like I said, I mean, we had in my opinion, three bad games on the mound as a staff, but as a whole, out of the first 25 games, I don't know, I was pretty happy with like 23 of them. So again, it's not like Coach Swope put it best, I think, at the end of the game when he was talking to the team was, this is just adversity for us. It is what it is. It's not like we're going to go home and say, oh my gosh, we got to change everything. It's just, let's get back to work, figure out what makes us better and what made us good before, and build off that.
Some of those improvements in the pitching, I know I talked to you a little bit about it, the use of the technology, the TrackMan team didn't really use that before. Can you kind of describe how you use the TrackMan to kind of look at the pitching data and help your team?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, for instance, this weekend, we were able to get that now with all the data sharing stuff we have, and looking back at it, for instance, at one of our weekend guys and seeing how off all of his metrics were, that then told us, okay, something must be off in his delivery in order to throw off every single pitch. His arm angle, his release height, his release slot, everything was different. So then that gave me a chance to then dive into the video even more, look at it a little more closely as to, why would his arm slot be 7 or 8 degrees higher? What threw that off? And then we could go back and we watch video. We actually took a couple clips from Michigan's Twitter on some bad pitches and put that side by side against some good video against Michigan State. and we were able to find, something very, very important. So hopefully if we can get that back on track this week in his bullpen session, he'll be right back to where he was. So yeah, the data stuff is always good. I mean, but it's like I told our guys again, the text I sent them today on our off day is, we, at the end of the day, we didn't meet our 3 goals. So if we don't meet any of those 3, we're just not going to win. I mean, we're going to have to win 15-12, which is not really how any team should win. So yes, the metrics were off for some guys, but even if they're off, if we pitch ahead, win the first 3 pitches, there's a good chance we give ourselves a chance to win.
Just wanted to ask you about pitch tunneling and or an overlay kind of in the video. How much do you use that? And kind of second part of the question, what do you do with guys who aren't necessarily big data visual learners, right? Like they don't learn that way. They're kind of maybe the more old school pitcher, that type of thing, versus guys who, all they've grown up on is spin rate and whatnot. How do you balance that? And what are your teaching strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as pitch tunneling goes, it's funny because we were actually talking about that in the airport last night and talking about possibly buying something that our hitters use for vision reasons that Swope throws through, possibly incorporating that with our pitchers just as another thing to possibly help a guy or two, and like me and him are always on the same page with this stuff. If we got to buy something that only helps one guy, it's worth it. I don't care if it costs $5,000, it's worth buying because for every player we can help, it's going to help our team. But yeah, it is kind of a fine line between that stuff. There are some guys that if they dive too much into the data and the analytics and the pitch breaks and the spin, they start to get in their own heads, So I think that's where my job comes in to say, okay, it's important to know these things and use these things, but you have to know what works for you. And as we all know, you can't be on the mound thinking about these things anyway. So this is literally just a practice session thing for us. So we're going to use the data. We're going to work on it. We're going to use Portable TrackMan. We're going to overlay some videos to show you that your fastball to this zone and your slider to that zone are what tunnel best. And we do that throughout the year. But there are guys that honestly, it's great because a lot of times they'll just look at me and say, hey man, I don't know what this TrackMan thing is saying. I don't really care. Just tell me what to do. The same way that I allow all of our pitchers to swipe, and change the pitch at any point in time. If they have full conviction in a pitch and it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the last thing I want you to do is throw a pitch that I told you to throw. You're second guessing it. Therefore, it's probably not going to be good. It's the same way when we practice. If we got TrackMan set up and I'm telling you, hey, we want to manipulate your curveball to this degree, and this is why, and they say, yeah, I don't really want to look at that. You just tell me. Then that's what I do. So I look at it and I keep it away from them. And that's a guy to guy thing. Pitcher to pitcher. It's always going to be different for that type of stuff.
What about as a pitching coach? I know the sweeper's kind of been revolutionary at the MLB level, at least, has been a pitch that's trended to a lot of guys using it. Have you seen anything in the collegiate level, like a pitch or a pitch movement that's really kind of rocketed up these past couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot more guys throw cutters. I don't know if that's because it seems easier for people to coach it or easier for younger players to throw it within the strike zone. I don't really know the exact reason why, to be honest with you, but I know there for a while, a lot of pitching coaches in college were talking about the sweeper and trying to do it, but I think people find out very quickly that it's extremely difficult to do, and you also need the right arm slots to do it with. I think, there's plenty of big leaguers and minor leaguers that were trying to be taught that pitch, and it ended up throwing off all their other stuff because it didn't fit their arsenal. And I think that's always something that's tricky for a college pitcher. The last thing you want to do is mess up a kid's fastball and two seam and, their best 3 pitches because you're trying to add a fourth. I think that's where the fine line comes in for that sort of thing. But yeah, if I had to guess, I would say cutter. I mean, more often than not, I hear more hitting coaches say pitchers we're going to face have a cutter, and I feel like I didn't hear that very often years ago.
I threw a cutter in high school, and it got bombed, so that's why I'm not playing collegiately.
Take me through your decision and kind of your journey to becoming a coach, because I know you played at Shepherd. What kind of made that shift go to playing to coaching?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I mean, to be honest, I just knew I wanted to do something in baseball because that's the only thing I really like doing, and the only thing I think I even know how to do somewhat. So, I used to joke with my dad all the time. I mean, I can't fix cars. I can't build things. I'm not very handy. So I didn't really know what the heck I was going to do. And I was still playing independent ball a little bit, and I ran into one of my cousins, actually, that his sons were playing at Archbishop Spalding, which is like a powerhouse in the state of Maryland now. Back when I was in high school, they were not very good at baseball. So I was a little taken back, meaning like I didn't know if I really wanted to help out at a not so great program. And he said, no, we're good now. We're good. Like you got to come over and help out. So I started helping out, and then I met the varsity coach, who's now the head coach at DeMatha. And back then he had built Spalding into like basically like a state powerhouse, probably a top 5 team in the state. And I just started working with pitchers there because nobody else could. He looked at me and goes, listen, I was a AAA shortstop. I was a hitter. I don't know anything about pitching. I just want them to throw strikes. So, which is what every hitting coach says. So he's like, yeah, man, you do whatever you want. So I kind of fell into it in that sense. And then after I started doing it every day, I just fell in love with it. And I mean, to be honest, I never thought I would like anything better than playing baseball. Like I didn't think I would actually love something as much as I did playing. And it took maybe 1 year into coaching to be like, okay, this is even better than playing baseball.
What about coaching for you was so much better than playing? What about teaching people did you like more than actually being kind of, I guess, in the spotlight yourself?
Yeah, I think it just came down to helping people. I think that's just kind of the way I was brought up. My mom, my dad were that way. I mean, we had a couple different times when I was growing up, friends of mine lived with us when they had, some issues at home or maybe not even an issue, just, parents had to be gone for a length of time. One was military based. One was just didn't have parents around very often. And it just became normal to me, just helping people. Like, for instance, my dad coached me from T-ball all the way up to like 12 and under, and he didn't know anything about baseball. He knew as much as just watching TV. He just did it because he was one of the parents that said, I'm going to go to my boss at my job and tell him I need to be off at certain times on certain days because we need somebody to coach the team. And the way he was, and again, not with any technical things in baseball, but just the type of person he was with helping kids, especially the ones that weren't very good, I think just kind of it got ingrained in my mind. It got ingrained in my head to where it was like, man, this is pretty cool to see a kid that maybe was thinking about quitting baseball and all of a sudden he can hit the ball and he wants to play again. But then also when I was coaching at Spalding, I started to fall into this where I was coaching, and in that season alone, we had 4 Division I players all in the same grad class, and 4 or 5 other players move on to D2 and D3. And I was finding myself gravitating towards even the best players and going, okay, well, I know he's already 89, 91 and throws strikes, but how can we make him ready for Division I as opposed to just being another freshman that shows up and needs to develop for 2 more years. So I kind of found myself falling into that, wanting to really work even more so, I guess, with the upper end talent. And then that's what kind of got me into college coaching. I just on a whim tried it and said, okay, most coaches do like what Tommy Gardner for us did. As soon as he gets done playing, he hops right on staff and kind of learns the tricks of the trade and sees from older people around him how to do things. I didn't do that, of course. So I wasn't a volunteer assistant until, I guess, 4 years out of college, I believe. So I was a little older than most volunteers. But I knew if I was going to try it and going to kind of see if that was the path I wanted to go, I was going to have to do it at that point in time. If I was getting upwards of 30 years old, I probably couldn't take a 0 paying job. But being 26 or 5, whatever I was at the time, I could find a way to make it work. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really what it comes back to from a coaching aspect. I genuinely enjoy seeing a kid figure something out and then flourish with it, to where they just kind of take off, or going over video and saying, okay, I think this is it. And then we find out that that's it. We find the answer to make them better.
Going to that collegiate coaching between Fordham and JMU, I believe it's 10 pitchers that were drafted into the MLB that you coached. Is that something that you take pride in, being able to produce that top level talent?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I think I had very little to do with it as a coach, but at the same time, I think at times you also you help them get out of their own way. For instance, I guess he wasn't the first one, but one of the first ones. It might have been our first one at Fordham, who's pitched in and out of the big leagues now for the last 3 or 4 years. I'll never forget. We had a conversation during his freshman year. He was really, really good for us. He was our best reliever. And we knew he was good enough to start. We just didn't need him to. That was kind of the role we needed. And he never really thought I was doing anything with him with his pitching delivery. And I remember him saying that to me one time, like, well, what else can I do? What else do you want me to do? And it's great because he wanted to learn, he wanted to get better. But I just kept telling him, I said, listen, man, I know I don't know everything. Like, I'm still young, but I swear there's nothing else for you to do. Like, I think now we can learn about pitching in and pitching out and pitching up and down and, maybe adding another pitch if we can do it or something. But I'm telling you, I think your delivery is really good. So what happened was he ended up off on the side going and working with someone in the area. And I found out through one of our other coaches, kind of overheard something. So I brought him in and I said, hey man, what are you doing? Like, we're on throwing schedules and things like that. How did you just randomly throw a bullpen on a day that nobody knew? Like, why are you doing this? And he's like, well, I just thought, there's got to be something I can do. And I'm like, listen, man, you can believe me or not. Like, I can't control what you do, but I'm telling you, your delivery is perfect. Like, it is picture perfect. Like, if I have a son, I'm going to turn on video of you and go throw like this. And he's like, so anyway, he finally ended up believing me. And it was funny because a year or two later, he gets drafted, I think in the 9th or 10th round, whatever. And he got, I think it was the Padres he was originally with. And the coordinator at the time was Mark Pryor. And he threw his first bullpen after signing, and Mark Pryor was there. They have a conversation. He calls me that night and goes, Jimmy, you'll never guess what Mark Pryor just told me. And I said, well, that's cool. You're around Mark Pryor. Like, that's got to be sick. He's like, yeah, but it was awesome. He goes, we threw a 25-pitch fastball bullpen. And you know how good I am with locating. Like, I just dotted 25 pitches. Like, everybody was amazed that, like, how the hell did I go in the 10th round? And I'm like, well, that's good. And I said, what did Mark say? Like, did he say good stuff? And he goes, he looked at me and said, listen, if any of our pitching coaches in our system try to change your delivery, you call me and tell them that I said nobody changes you. You throw exactly the way you're throwing right now. And I was like, oh, so now Mark Pryor said it and you believe him. So I was right. And he goes, yeah, I'm glad you left me alone. And I think that's part of it for coaches too at this level. Like, yes, I want to help them and I want to continuously make them better. There's always something, but it's not always physical that we can help guys get better. Sometimes they got that, sometimes they're pretty good at that. So yeah, I mean, that was like a big learning experience for me that happened to work out in my favor. But at the same time, it kind of proved what I already was thinking of, like, sometimes it's also my job just to get out of their way and help them get out of their own way, to say, hey man, it's not a mechanics thing. It's just, let's make our stuff better.
And now you take that philosophy to Maryland, first season here, back in your home state. Was this sort of like a dream job for you to be coaching back here in College Park?
Oh yeah, it definitely was. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, every year, probably since about my second or third year at Siena, I started writing down just personal goals for myself, whether it was within coaching or life or whatever. And I kind of really dove into that through hearing some different things and started to believe that, when you write them down and you read them every day, you got a better chance of achieving them. and it's something I try to preach to our players. But yeah, that was something that, I remember looking back one time. I mean, I've deleted them since, but when I was at Fordham, my main goal was to get into the Mid-Atlantic or the South and be able to, make a living to where if my wife chose not to work, if we had kids, she could choose, she could be home and raise our kids, and, I could basically support us through coaching baseball. I didn't have like a set number or anything like that. And then I ended up getting JMU like a year later, and we achieved that goal, I think, our second year down there. And then since being at JMU, that was really the only goal from there, was if I was to leave, which I really got to a place where I didn't have to leave. I always said the only thing that's going to take me away is a Power 5 job that puts us even in a better situation for our family, but it has to be with someone that's well respected and trusted, that I know is also going to have my back the way I have the head coach's back. And then I had actually, put in there at one point that if it's the University of Maryland, I'm going, and it was funny because when Swope called me, he was, going through a whole bunch of stuff for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden said, listen, I think I'm going to be named the head coach. And if I do, you're coming here. Like, are you in or not? And I'm like, Jesus, that was fast. Like, this is the first time we've ever spoken. I said, yeah. Now it helped because I had already known of him, and I knew everybody spoke highly of him. And the little conversations we've had recruiting wise, I knew he was a good person. So I kind of already had those boxes checked. But yeah, I mean, this is without a doubt where I've always wanted to be, secretly. I mean, I never told anybody that. I didn't even tell my wife that. Even when I mentioned it to her, she's like, really? Like, I mean, she doesn't know college athletics or anything like we do. She just, of course, knew I was from here, but she knows I didn't play here or anything. But it was funny the way it worked out because I never really envisioned it happening. I think it was 2 pitching coaches ago. So I guess it's longer than that because he was here longer than that. So maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when Vaughn had taken over, I didn't know Rob at all. I'd just seen him recruiting a little bit. I was really hoping back then that I was going to get a chance to come here, but I didn't. We didn't even talk, and we didn't know each other. And then when he left, when that pitching coach left, I'm like, man, like, hopefully I talked to Vaughn because I'll go there in a minute. And he actually did reach out and we spoke, but at the time, the situation just didn't make sense. The way the shuffling of the coaching positions were going to work, it wasn't even like a real in-depth conversation at that point. It just wasn't going to be feasible. But it was nice to at least have that conversation. That was the first time that Maryland was actually like, oh, damn, like that was close. Like that, that was almost a thing. So when Swope called, it was, I was leaving. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I second guessed it a couple times just because we had a nice setup where we were and things like that with our kids. But I kept going back to like, this is a no-brainer,
One really quick one for you, Coach. Is Matt Swope? Rob Vaughn crept into my mind there for a sec. Is Matt Swope? Do we think it's like a forever job for him? And I don't, just in your opinion, knowing him.
I think so. I mean, the way he is, I mean, the things he talks about with just the state of Maryland and Baltimore and D.C. and the way he grew up, where he grew up, I don't imagine how anybody could get him away from here. I really don't. We were joking about it on our trip. He was like, of course, the Orioles open up when we're on the road, because if not, I'd be at Pickles right now. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, man, I go to opening day every year. I'm like, really? Like, damn, I just haven't had a chance to do many fun things while I've coached in college. And I think he's really lucked out in that sense, but well earned. Like, him only being here as a coach, like, he's kept his close friends from high school, his close friends from college, his mom and dad are here. Like, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine somebody talking him out of leaving here. I really don't.
Unless he gets an MLB job, which at that point, I think Maryland fans would be okay with, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and if it's an MLB job, it would have to be the manager or hitting coach for the Orioles. And I don't see him. I don't see him moving away from here. I really don't. You know,
Right.
it's weird. All the guys that I've coached for so far either grew up exactly where they were coaching or really close to where they were coaching. So like Coach Rossi at Siena is from Schenectady. Schenectady is 15 minutes from Latham, which is where Siena is. Kevin Layton lived a town over from the town he grew up in coaching at Fordham. Ike was the furthest away from home, but he was in the same state 2 hours from the town he grew up in. Like Coach Ike at JMU he grew up in Richmond, then he went to VMI, which is 2 hours away down here, and then he coached at William & Mary back over here. Then he went back to VMI as the head coach, and then went to JMU. He's been in the same 2-hour radius for the 50 years he's been alive. And Swope's done the same thing as a coach. Which I've really lucked out with that. The problem is I was never the one that was close to home until now.
Well, thank you so much, Coach Jackson. We really appreciate it. Awesome to hear your insight. And as we head into baseball season, can't wait to see how the Dirty Terps turn out and how your pitching staff looks in year one. So thanks again so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you very much.